Okay, so really the bulk of the presentation is going to be on specific strategies, and that's why we're here, right, to learn some strategies and some takeaways. But it is really important that we got to go back in time and take a look back at some underlying precursors of language development. Because when we're working with children or individuals with autism, we are pretty much doing this across the lifespan. All of these things really come into play across the lifespan. And so when we think about early on when we have infants and young babies, right, it's important for us to look at the precursors for language development. What things need to be in place so that children learn to communicate, right? And it seems like it's a very natural process that happens, and it does happen like that for a good majority of infants. But this premise of social orienting, that a child will spontaneously or upon request direct the attention to another person. Children with autism show social orienting impairments early in life by preferentially orienting to non-social over social stimuli. This is very important to kind of get a hold of. Now, all babies, regardless of whether or not they have autism, will make eye contact within the first 2 months of life, right? And usually we say, oh, they're looking at mom, or right. But what happens is that in individuals with autism, they have actually found, research has found, that their levels in the brain of dopamine and certain oxytocin, which is an opioid, right, gets released from interactions with their mothers or caregivers. And so in infants that do not go on to develop autism spectrum disorder, this becomes a fascination with people, right? They're getting literally high off of people. They love it, right? They want more. They want mom and dad's attention. Everybody's cooing and gooing all over the place, and they love it. And that makes them seek that more, right? Because the more they have, the more they want that interaction and that social interaction. But what happens is that in the research, they've actually found that in infants with autism, they have less of those chemicals released. And therefore, they're orienting towards things rather than people as they continue to develop. Which is why when we reach that early toddlerhood, we start seeing that separation. Well, they're no longer interested in mom and dad as much as they are as what's spinning or what's lighting up or things like that. So that's one of the early foundations. So we just need to kind of understand where that preoccupation or desire to interact with objects comes from. Okay, so the next early precursor for language is joint attention, which is an early developing social communicative skill in which two people, usually a young child and an adult, use gestures and gaze to share attention with respect to interesting objects or events. This skill plays a critical role in social and language development, right? So, we have mom and dad, we're both, engaged in peekaboo, or we're both looking at this cool toy together, right? And so the key word here is joint, right? Joint attention, where two people are attending to the same thing. This is different than paying attention, because I might be paying attention to something my child is doing, but that might not be joint, right? I can pay attention, when my daughter is doing something, and okay, yeah, but not really be in the moment. To me, joint attention is really being in the moment with your child, attending to the same thing, having that back and forth, just all engaged, all consumed. And the reason I said that these things are important because this has to persist in children and individuals with autism always, right? So you might always be working towards getting joint attention or joint conversation, right? So your effort is always to kind of have them with you, right, and interacting and engaging. So this is certainly important, and we don't abandon this when we're working or with children with autism, or if you have a child with autism. This is something that kind of is a principle that you use lifelong, right? Always getting them to be, and obviously you can't do this 24/7. But when you are having those joint interaction moments, you want them to be really good, high quality. right? You want them to, be in their world, and have them accept you in that world and engage you in their world. Imitation, right? This is something that also is essential, right? It is not a coincidence that the first words of children usually are mama and dada and ball, right? Because we're in their faces doing, say, mama, 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 dada, right? We're doing this. So what are they doing? They're imitating. Early babbling is a lot of imitation, right? Those sounds that they're hearing, and now they're using it, right? They're starting, and then that starts to translate into mama. Before it was mama, mama, mama. Now it's mama, right? So imitation is critical, and it's also a huge therapeutic strategy. A lot of times, I know for myself, I have to start here at imitation because a lot of times kiddos are not doing this. They can echo, but they're not imitating. It's different. It's qualitatively different, right? Echo is their generation, or they're generating that and repeating it back. Where imitating is something I'm asking them to do, that I want them to do it back, right? So it involves a child's ability to copy others' actions with objects, gestures and body movements, sounds, or words. Typically, children learn to imitate in infancy, like we were just saying. Back and forth imitation is really an early conversation without words, helping infants learn to express interest in their caregiver for social reasons, share an emotion with their caregiver, take turns, and pay attention to their caregiver. So, imitation is another in-the-moment type of thing. I want you to do it, and you do it, right? And then you have a reaction to that, and it's like, oh, Mom really liked that, so I want to do that again because I want Mama to smile again, right? So it's this back and forth, really conversation. Not necessarily using words. It can be gestural imitation, right? A lot of times I'll start with just clap your hands, or we'll do something silly. It doesn't have to always be words first. Right? And sometimes you have to do it with gestures first or something nonverbal before you get to the words, because they might not understand that that's what you're asking them to do. I want you to imitate. Sometimes I have to do it hand over hand, where I physically take them and do it, right, to understand, until they say, okay, this is what she wanted me to do. Okay, so just some notes about imitation in children with autism. Children with autism often have great difficulty with imitation, but we also know that their ability to imitate can predict the following. Ability to imitate gestures and body movements predicts language outcomes. Ability to imitate actions and objects predicts play skills development. We're going to talk a little bit about play after. Challenges with imitating the actions of others impact peer play development. I know, like, my child is in kindergarten, and she'll always tell me, well, her little friend on the playground did this, and then I joined in, right? So a lot of kids will often, copy what their peers are doing so that they can kind of fit in and be socially accepted in that game or routine. But that's really hard for our kids with ASD. Children need to develop some imitation skills in order to expand joint attention and engagement with others. And that's why I felt like I had to take the time to talk about these underlying principles, because really the rest of language and communication makes no sense if we don't know where it's coming from. Right? We can't work on strategies to help the issues if we don't know the underlying principles that are necessary for those skills. So I like this quote by Temple Grandin that says, "You have got to keep autistic children engaged with the world. You cannot let them tune out," right? Because if we let them tune out, they will tune out, right? So it's this kind of constant work at keeping them engaged, at keeping them socially oriented, keeping their joint attention. Whether it's at home or at school, right? It's also in the classroom too, right? How are you going to get that child engaged in learning, right? Are you giving them all the supports they need? Are you repeating things? Are you giving visual support? There's so many things that go into that. But it's really important that if we're not in tune with that, then that can happen, right? We have to really understand the child and understand their strengths and their challenges, and really, create a situation to help them grow and develop. Okay, so we have the next part of our action plan. Laura, you want to just kind of review the questions?
Yes, so we're going to take a quick break to answer questions 4 through 6. So this is kind of about those, precursors to language that Allison was just talking about. So reflecting on your child's early skills in those areas, so social orienting, joint attention, imitation, and then if you have an older child maybe, have you seen any changes in those areas? If so, what are they? And then 5 and 6 kind of tie together. How did you initially try to encourage those, if you did? And then, are you doing something now to try to increase those skills, even if it's not something that you consciously knew you were doing? Maybe Allison just said something about joint attention, and you realize, oh, I have been doing that all along. When I was putting the toy next to my face, or anything that you guys can think of, some strategies that maybe you've already been doing this at home. So we'll give you guys a few minutes.